And as I say that, it just occurred to me that I don't know what chapters we're going to do next week. Actually, next week is Thanksgiving. We won't meet. But we're going to talk about Mount Sinai in our next class 2 weeks from now. So I'll have to let people know by email what the verses will be for our next class. Probably Exodus 19. I just don't know exactly which verses we'll cover. But for tonight, Exodus 3, verses 11 through 15, the second part of the burning bush story. And really what we're going to be talking about tonight is the meaning of God's name, because this is the part where Moses has a conversation with God about his name. And the explanation of the name that God gives here is in some ways unusual, and it's very instructive. And I hope that we'll have some good things to say about that. Before we begin, I'd like to start with some prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by his commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. And I pray that we would come to know you the way you reveal yourself in this chapter, where you say, I will be what I will be. And you reveal yourself by your actions. And we see what kind of God you are by your actions. And especially by your actions in Yeshua, we see the fundamental nature that is yours, God. And it's a loving, rescuing, redeeming nature. And I pray that we would understand that you will be what you will be. And may we be changed forever by it in knowing you. I pray in Yeshua's name. Amen. Well, I'm going to make sure that everybody's hearing me okay. I'll probably do some screen sharing tonight. Oh, good. Video and audio are good tonight. No problems. That's good to know. I'll do some screen sharing tonight. I realized right 1 minute before it was time for me to start class that I had not finished all of my slides. So when we get to verse 15, I won't have a slide to show for that. But I've got slides for verses 11 through 14. And so let's take a look at Exodus 3:11. Oh, of course, now that I think about it, I didn't put them into a PDF to make them larger, but hopefully you'll be able to see pretty well the Hebrew. So we have Vayomer Moshe El Ha-Elohim Mi Anochi Ki Elech El Paro V'chi Otzi Et Bnei Yisrael Mi Mitzrayim. And let's talk about the meaning. So almost every verse, there's a lot of conversation that will go on between God and Moses in these 5 verses that we're going to translate tonight. And so there's a lot of Vayomer, and he said. And usually the way dialogues work in the Hebrew Bible, it won't always tell you who the person is that said. Usually the first time, like if it says Vayomer Moshe El Ha-Elohim, here we know who is speaking and who he is speaking to. It's Moses who's speaking. Vayomer Moshe. Moses is the subject. Vayomer is and he spoke. So and Moses said, or and Moses spoke, El unto Ha-Elohim, God. Usually the way dialogue works in Hebrew, when there's an interchange going on between 2 characters, it's sort of like they take turns. The next time it says Vayomer, sorry, I still have the cough that I had last week, it would be the other person answering what was said. And we'll see some of that going on tonight. Although interestingly, there's going to be one time that it kind of breaks the rule about taking turns. So, Vayomer Moshe, and Moses said, El unto Ha-Elohim, God, Mi Anochi, Ki Elech El Paro. Now, this might not look like a question. When you're translating the Hebrew Bible, oftentimes you'll see a question and you won't realize as a translator that you need to translate it as a question. Because there are no question marks. There are no punctuation marks in the Hebrew Bible. So you have to look for question words. And the word me here means who. It's a question word. So it is a question, even though there's not a question mark. And it's something to be aware of when you're translating. Let me go back to sharing that Hebrew with you. And mi anochi. Mi means who. Anochi is the archaic way to say I. Ani is the more common way to say I. Anochi is a little bit more old-fashioned or formal. But mi anochi, who am I? Ki, that, elech, I should go. Okay, let's talk about elech for a minute. Elech is an imperfect verb, and it's a drop letter imperfect. Now, imperfect means that it's a prefix form of the verb. And so when you look at elech, you see it has 3 letters. And by the way, I think whenever I do finger diagrams here on the video, they're always backwards. So this is supposed to be the finger that's on the right, as Hebrew goes from right to left. But I think on the video, it's going to show up backwards. I don't know the solution to that. But anyway, the imperfect verb has prefixes and then the root of the verb. And sometimes it also will have a suffix. It can also be called the prefix form of the verb. And this prefix form of the verb is usually future tense. Now, in the verb elech, we just have 3 letters. We have aleph, lamed, kaf. The aleph is a prefix, the lamed and the kaf are the root. So one of the root letters has dropped out. And it's the kind we talk about a lot, the drop letter imperfect. And that is when the prefix comes in front of the verb, it causes the first letter to drop out. Now, what verb has a lamed and a kaf as the second and third letter? Halach. It's such a common verb, you probably don't even have to think very hard about it. Okay, so let me go back to screen sharing. However, even though I said that usually the imperfect is a future tense, this one should probably be translated that I should go, not that I will go. Who am I that I should go? Sometimes a verb can have, a future verb can have a sense of should, may, let, expressing a wish or asking a question. So instead of who am I that I will go, unto, paro, Pharaoh, it's who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh. And then, v'chi otzi et bnei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim. V'chi, and that, ki often means that, sometimes it can mean because. Otzi. Now, what is otzi? First of all, otzi is an imperfect. It has a prefix. And again, it has that aleph prefix. And aleph is the I will. Second of all, it's a hifil. And a hifil verb, one of the things that marks a hifil verb is an infixed yod between the second and third root letter. So in between that sadi and that aleph, you see the yod. That tells you that it's a hifil. And you might ask yourself, what is the root of it? Well, if we eliminate the aleph and that yod that I just told you about, we know those are not a part of the root. What we're left with are vav, sade, and aleph. But we know that that vav is not exactly a root letter. There are no verbs that start with vav. However, something I've mentioned a number of times, vav and yod are interchangeable in a verb root. So what we need to look for is yod, sade, aleph. And yatzah is a very common verb. It means to go out. And in the hifil form, it means to cause to go out. And how do you cause something to go out? You bring it out. So who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring out? And then we have et, the direct object marker. Bring out what or who? B'nai Yisrael. That is the sons of Israel, but it usually doesn't mean just the males. It usually means everyone when it says that. So it's proper to translate it, the children of Israel. And I'll say more about B'nai Yisrael in just a minute. Mi Mitzrayim, me from Mitzrayim, Egypt. Okay, let's talk about B'nai Yisrael for a minute. This is what we call a construct or a word pair. And basically in Hebrew, anytime you put 2 nouns next to each other and there's nothing in between them, you probably have a word pair or a construct chain. And whenever the first word of a word pair is plural, if it's a masculine plural, what's the plural of son? The word for son is bain. The plural of it is banim. And so it would have that yod mem ending. But when it's in a word pair, im changes to a. That is the tsere with the yod. And anytime you see a tsere yod ending, it's the somethings of. So instead of banim, children or sons, Yisrael, it's b'nei Yisrael, sons of Israel. But again, meaning children of Israel. All right. So Moses wonders who he is that God would pick him to do this. Let's see what God's answer is in the next verse. And Exodus 3:12. Vayomer. Now notice it doesn't say who spoke. Remember I said the normal rule in Hebrew dialogue is that the speakers take turns. Moses spoke last time, so if you see Vayomer again, it's probably God speaking. All right, Vayomer, ki ehyeh imach. Okay, let's talk about ki ehyeh imach. That is, for I will be with you. Let's talk about that. Ki can mean that, because, for, and ehyeh, we see this as an imperfect, and again it has that aleph prefix, which is the I will, and the root is hey yod hey, which is the to be verb. That I will be imach, with you. Normally we think of the ach as the feminine ending, but oftentimes with the verb im, you get the feminine ending even if it's talking about a male. So that's why it says imach, even though God, the you that God is talking to is a male, Moses. Vayomer ki ehyeh imach, v'zeh lecha ha'ot ki anochi shelachticha, b'hotziacha et ha'am mimitzrayim, ta'avdun et ha'elohim al hahar hazeh. All right. Let's talk about v'zeh lecha ha'ot ki anochi shelachticha. V'zeh lecha. And this is to you. Okay, zeh means this, le means to, cha is the you ending. And this is to you, ha'ot, the sign, ki, that, anochi, I, shelachticha. All right, what you want to do with shelachticha is a lot of times there'll be a verb that has a pronoun suffix on the end of it. And I find what's helpful to do is to just take my thumb, literally, especially when you're new at Hebrew, take your thumb and cover up the final suffix on the end. And what would you have? You'd have shalachti. It's a lot easier to recognize shalachti than it is to recognize it with the suffix on it. So sometimes it helps me if I just cover it up and see what the form of the verb was before the suffix was added to it. All right, so shalachti would mean I sent. Shalach is the root that means send. Why does it have the cha on the end? Because that means you. Shalachti, I sent, cha, you. Then this will be the sign that I sent you. By the way, what's kind of the logic of this sentence? God is saying to Moses, because I will be with you, I'm actually going to do this extra good thing for you, and I'm going to give a sign that I sent you. It's, because God is on Moses' side, he's going to give this sign. And what is the sign? Bahotziacha et ha'am mimitzrayim. Okay. Bahotziacha is not a super easy Hebrew phrase to translate. Ba usually means in or with. Hotzi is actually the infinitive form of yatsa. It's a hiphil infinitive. And it's not easy to tell just by looking at it that's an infinitive. A lot of times what you need to do when you see the form of a verb is to figure out the root and look it up in Holiday, the lexicon that I recommend you use, and try to see that form so he will tell you what kind of verb it is. So if you take out your Holiday, concise Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon, if you figured out that the root was yatsa, which you probably did because we had it, and we also had a hiphil form of yatsa just in the previous verse, which I explained to you, then you want to look for hotzi, and you'll find out that it's an infinitive. And you might not know much about infinitives. Oftentimes they can be translated with an ing, like a gerund in English. So if hotzi, if it's from yatzah, but the hifil form of yatzah in the kal would mean to go out, and the hifil it means to cause to go out or to bring out. If you were going to put that into an infinitive, it would probably be bringing. All right? In bringing. Why would you use the expression this way? Why would you say in bringing? It's an expression of time. And quite often, infinitives are used in expressions about timing. So what it really means is not in bringing you, it's when you bring. So even though ba all by itself doesn't mean when, if you're going to translate a time expression in English, you got to use a word that people understand has to do with time. So it probably makes more sense to translate it when you bring et, the direct object marker, ha'am, the people, mi Mitzrayim, from Egypt. When you bring them out from Egypt. He's going to show a sign when Moses brings the people out from Egypt. And what is the sign? Ta'avdun. Okay, if you look at ta'avdun, this is an imperfect. The prefix is a tav. So it's probably going to be the you form or possibly the she or the they feminine form. And you see it has the u suffix on the end of it. The root is ayin, beit, dalet, which means to serve or to worship. Ta'avdun. You, plural, will worship et ha-Elohim, God, al, on, ha-har hazeh, this mountain. So the point is, when Moses brings the people out, they're going to have a sign. They're actually going to escape from Egypt, and they're going to wind up back at Mount Sinai, or at Mount Horeb. So it's not really a miraculous sign, I guess you could say, but the fact that they'll be set free and they'll be able to come and worship God at Horeb is a miracle. Consider they're slaves in the land of Egypt. Now, Moses still isn't satisfied. He's got more questions to ask God. He really wants to think this thing through. So in verse 13, he's going to ask some pretty interesting questions. He's going to get us into this issue of God's name, which is a pretty cool issue, I think. So Exodus 3:13. Vayomer Moshe el ha-Elohim hine anochi va el bnei Yisrael va'amarti lahem Elohei avotechem shelachtani alechem va'amru li ma shemo ma omar alehem. Okay, it's a lot of words, but not terribly difficult to translate. Vayomer Moshe, and Moses said, El ha-Elohim, to God. Hine, behold, Anochi va, I come. Va is either the perfect or the participle. They look exactly the same. You can't tell just by looking at it. To me, it makes the most sense to translate it in the present tense. Behold, I come, El bnei Israel, unto the children of Israel, va'amarti lahim, and I say to them. You know, the way Moses expresses it, he's actually stating a condition. It doesn't use any special word for a condition. It's just kind of a way of speaking. Behold, I come to the children of Israel and I say to them. What does he, in this supposal, say to them? He says, Elohei avotechem shelachtani alechem. All right, Elohei avotechem. Elohei is the construct form of Elohim. Remember, I said anytime you see the tsere yod ending, you know, it's the somethings of something. But God's title, Elohim, is plural all by itself. And so if you want to say God of, you use that tsere yod ending. Elohei means God of. Avot echem. Now, remember I said sometimes it's helpful to cover up the suffixes with your phone. If you look at avot, you see that avot is fathers. By the way, that's a very strange thing. The word fathers is a feminine plural. It's one of the strange exceptions in Hebrew. You would expect fathers to be avim, but instead it's avot. And then the chem means you. So it's the fathers of you, your fathers. The God of your fathers, shalachticha, sent me, or shalachteni, I think it is. Let's look. I'm not looking at the Hebrew right now. Shalachtani. Shalachtani aleichem. So shalach would just be sent, and the ani ending means me. The God of your fathers, shalach, sent ani me, aleichem, unto you, plural. And this is the first part of Moses' question. He says, behold, I come to the children of Israel and I say to them, the God of your fathers sent me to you. And then comes his big question. Va'amaru li, and they say to me. All right, look at va'amru. If it didn't have the va in front of it, if it was just amru, it would actually be past tense. It would be and they said. But when you put va in front of a perfect, it converts it to a future. So instead of meaning and they said, now it means and they will say, li, to me. That's called the vav conversive. And that vav converts the perfect into a future. And they will say to me, ma shemo. What is shemo? His name. The word name is shem. And then you put the o ending on it, which is his. So shemo is his name. What is his name? And because there's no punctuation in the middle of a Hebrew verse, it might not be clear to you that a new thought starts after shemo. Ma omar aleihim. Ma, what, omar, will I say, aleihim, unto them. Him is the ending that means them, which I always think is kind of easy to remember because the English word them has the word him in the middle of it. Think about it, if you leave off the T. Okay, so let's talk about omar, because omar is a strange looking verb. Usually the vowels on verbs would be commates under the first, that vowel that looks like a T, and it makes the ah sound. But here we have the O. Why is there an O? I want to tell you something kind of surprising. That aleph is not the aleph of the root. Yes, the root of this word is aleph mem resh, but that aleph is the prefix. It's the prefix in the I will form of the verb, the first person imperfect. And that's why it has the cholam, or the O class vowel on it. And so Amar means he said, but Omar means I will say. So Ma Omar aleihim, what will I say to them? And remember what I said about questions. There are no question marks in the Hebrew Bible. So what makes something a question? When you see the a question word in the front of the clause. All right, now we come to the verse that I really wanted to talk about tonight. But before I do that, let me come off of screen sharing. Come over here and just make sure nobody has any questions. Okay, nobody who's watching tonight has asked me a question yet. Now, verse 14 is really the money verse in our passage tonight. It's got what I think is the most interesting content, everything we're going to talk about tonight. So I'll spend a little bit more time on it. Exodus 3:14. Vayomer Elohim el Moshe. And God said to Moses. The author's being very good about telling us who's doing the speaking. He's not doing a lot of just plain Vayomers, although he's about to break that rule in a minute. He's really spelling out who the speaker is and who the audience is almost every time here. Okay? Ehyeh asher ehyeh. So this is God answering Moses' question, what is your name? What will I say to them? Ehyeh asher ehyeh. This is so often translated as I am what I am, or I am who I am, all right? But really, ehyeh, this is the imperfect, right? It has the prefix in front of it. It's the aleph prefix. It's the I will form, the future usually. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible for an imperfect to be present tense, but normally we would translate it as future. And I'm just not sure why more people haven't been willing to translate this, I will be what I will be. Why everyone's so convinced it's I am. It could be because people are bringing some New Testament verses into this. But we should interpret this on its own. And normally, ehyeh would be I will be. So we're going to think in a minute about what it could mean if God says, I will be what I will be. But realize that part of what's going on is God is making an explanation for his 4-letter name. What is God's 4-letter name? Yod, He, Vav, He. And just take a look right now at ehyeh. Look at those letters. Aleph, He, Yod, He. God's 4-letter name, which we see in a lot of verses, is Yod, He, Vav, He. Remember I said that Yod and Vav are interchangeable in verb roots. So if the last 3 letters of God's 4-letter name are He, Vav, He, that is the same thing as He, Yod, He. It's from the verb to be. And the prefix on God's name is Yod. What does a Yod prefix mean? It means he will. So the 4-letter name of God essentially means he will be. But God is answering Moses from the first person right now, instead of saying his name in the third person. From God's perspective, he is I will be. When we refer to God, we refer to him as he will be. And this is kind of the explanation of God's name. He's explaining it as being related to the root of the to be verb. Now, at the end, I'm going to talk about what that could possibly mean at this point in the story. But let's just hold on to that for a minute. Vayomer, ko tomar livnei Yisrael. All right, remember I said usually in a dialogue, when there are 2 speakers, they take turns. But here, they're not taking turns. It's still God speaking, which you can tell from the content of what's being said. He's still commanding Moses what to do. But it is a little unusual that they would even bother to say Vayomer again. Could have started right off with Ko Tomar Livnei Israel. I think perhaps they did this to make it 100% clear God wasn't including these other words in his explanation of his name. It's a new thought. And he said, Ko, thus, Tomar, you will say, Li ne. The la is to, vane is children of Yisrael. And you will say to the children of Israel, Ehyeh shalachtani alechem. All right, I will be. So that's another reference by God to the meaning of his name, but he's saying it in the first person instead of the third person. He's not using the usual 4-letter name of God, Yod He Vav He. He's using the first person variation of it, Aleph He, Yod He. Shalachtani. Again, we had this exact same verb earlier, but if you cover up the suffix ni and you just have shalach, shalach means he sent, and the ani means me. So I will be sent me alechem, al unto chem, you. I will be sent me to you. It's a very interesting explanation of his name that God gives. And we'll just kind of finish it out with verse 15. Verse 15 is kind of long, but it's not particularly difficult Hebrew. Let me find it here. Vayomer od Elohim el Moshe. Now we come to the third time that Vayomer is actually God speaking, because it says Vayomer od Elohim. What's od? Od means also. And Elohim also said, El Moshe, unto Moses, Ko Tomar, thus you shall say, El Bnei Israel, unto the children of Israel, Yod He Vav He, Elohei Avotechem, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Shilachtani Alechem, Ze Shemi Leolam, V'Ze Zichri Ledor Dor. Okay, let's break this down. Ko Tomar, thus you shall say, El B'nai Yisrael, unto the children of Israel. Yod He Vav He. Now, usually when I'm reading the Hebrew text and I come to the four-letter name of God, I just say Adonai. But because this text we're reading tonight is so specific about God's name, I wanted to make sure you understood that it's actually the Yod He Vav He that's spoken here. It's some, God has given the explanation of his name in the first person every time, but here he's using it the way that is more customary in the third person. Now he's not saying I will be, now he's saying he will be, because that's how people normally refer to God's name. He will be. So, if you're translating this, you got a big decision to make. Do you translate it with the Lord or Adonai or Hashem or something like that? Or do you translate it, he will be? Let's think about how the translation would read if we said he will be. It would be, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, he will be sent me to you. I think that's actually pretty cool. He will be God of your fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, Shelachtani, sent me. We've had that several times already in this passage. Aleichem, unto you. All right. Now, the last little bit is pretty potent. It says, Ze, this, Shemi, my name. This is my name. Le'olam, forever. Ze, Shemi, le'olam. This is my name forever. I think that part of the reason he's really emphasizing this so much is because God is about to reveal who he is to the Israelites. And he's doing it at the time, he's explaining his name right before he's about to do something that he's forever going to be remembered by. God is about to set them free in the Exodus. And that act of God rescuing his people out of Egypt is going to be one of the things that defines the character of God. So, Ze Shemi Le'olam, this is my name forever. He will be. I'll explain the connection between will be and God's action in rescuing Israel a little bit more in a minute. V'zeh zichri ledor dor. I went crazy on zichri. It took me a good 5 minutes to figure it out because it doesn't look like any verb form I've ever seen of Zayin, Kaf, Resh. And finally, I figured out that's because it's not a verb. It's a noun. The normal noun form is zecher. So it has a segol on the Zayin and a segol on the Kaf. And a zecher is a memorial, a remembrance, something like that. But zichri, that puts the my suffix on the end of it. So it's like my remembrance or my memorial. I went with the translation, my remembrance. And this is my remembrance, lador dor, to all generations. Lador dor, dor means generation. And literally lador dor is to generation, generation, or to generation of generation. But it's an expression that means to all generations. So what we had actually was kind of a parallelism. The parallelism is, this is my name forever. This is my remembrance generation after generation. And you see the two words that are in parallel for name are Shemi, my name, and Zikri, my remembrance. And the two words that have to do with a long period of time that are in parallel with each other are Leolam, forever, and Lador Dor, to all generations. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance, generation after generation. Okay, so now that we've translated all of this, let me just read you the whole thing in translation. And Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring out the children of Israel from Egypt? And he said, because I will be with you, then this will be to you the sign that I have sent you. When you bring out the people from Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. So the very place that Moses sees the burning bush, the Israelites are going to come back there and worship him and receive the 10 Commandments there. Verse 13, and Moses said to God, behold, I come to the children of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers sent me to you. And they will say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? By the way, I like translating it literally. I feel like it has a more almost a New York or definitely a Jewish flair to it, the way it reads literally. Most translations smooth this out and try to make better English of it, but I like the way it reads more word for word. Verse 14, and God said to Moses, I will be what I will be. And he said, thus you will say to the children of Israel, I will be has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, he will be the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance, generation after generation. Okay. How is God connecting his name to this idea of will be? Well, when he says, I will be what I will be, he means you have to understand that the word name has oftentimes a sense of the essence of someone or their reputation or their character or their nature. Israel is about to discover who God is. And the way they're going to discover who God is through this event of the Exodus. The Exodus is the great saving event. It's the great rescue. And this expresses the nature of God. He's a rescuing God. He's a saving God. He's a God who pulls slaves out of their slavery. They're about to see who God will be. You remember, the Israelites don't have a whole lot of faith. When Moses first starts coming and things get worse for them, there's not a lot of faith. God is going to break through their difficulty in believing that something good could happen for them. He's going to break through their sort of slave mentality. He's going to break through their thinking that Egypt is powerful and nothing can rescue us from Egypt. He's going to break through that, and he's going to show them who he is. I will be what I will be. That's his name. The essence of God's name is this. God's nature can be determined by his actions. Let me say that again. God's nature can be determined by his actions. And God's actions always are redemptive. You might say, but sometimes God punishes, sometimes God destroys. But if you look at the long pattern of it, it's always in order to save. If you go through all of the destructions that are there in the Hebrew Bible, if you follow them, there's always a saving intent behind them, so that in the future, there will be a day when everyone will be saved. So in the future, there will be a generation that will realize and will be saved. In the future, so that people will turn to God again. That's always the intent. It's never to punish just out of vindictiveness or something like that. God's intent is always, like in the Exodus, to rescue, to save. I will be what I will be. You'll see who I am when you see what I do. And so for the Israelites, the Exodus becomes the event that defines the character of God. It's the saving God. And I want you to think about how when God came to earth as the divine Messiah, Yeshua, how God showed us an even deeper level of who he is. I will be what I will be when you see the divine Messiah coming to save those who are lost. That's the essence of God's character. The great event of the divine Messiah coming among us and being raised from the dead in order to bring us into the resurrection is the ultimate expression of God's nature. God's nature can be determined by his actions. This is kind of an important thing to think about, because perhaps you're in a situation where you wonder what God's fundamental attitude is toward you. But all you really have to do is think about God's actions in the past, and his character is described by his actions. What is God's character? To rescue and to save. God is fundamentally benevolent. That's what we need to realize. And that's what he means by I will be what I will be. You'll see who God is and have faith. He's the rescuing, saving God. That's the kind of God we're talking about. Okay, we will not meet next week because here in America, for those of you who don't live in America, it's Thanksgiving, huge family holiday. We'll meet in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about the Theophany on Mount Sinai. And I'm looking now in Exodus 19. Maybe I can just really quickly look at it and tell you what the verses will be. I was supposed to do this before class, and I forgot to do it. There are so many good verses here. I love, for example, Exodus 19:9. Behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud. I think the word there is arafel. It's a really cool word. but I don't think we'll do that verse. Let's see a little bit later. Yes, why don't we cover Exodus 19, 16 through 20. Exodus 19, 16 through 20. I'm going to have to write that down the second I get off of this video. Exodus 19, 16 through 20, it'll be Mount Sinai Part 1 is what we'll cover 2 weeks from today. Until then, this is Derek Leman, and I hope that you really think about this name of God. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. That God's nature is determined by his actions. We know him by what he has done. Good night.